So we're in Photoshop here, and what I'm going to do is just show you one of the processes that I tend to use when I'm designing, and that's to take an orthographic view. That means a view without perspective, so you'll be facing the object face on, flat on. You can either choose from the side or from the top, and that way, you're only going to be concerned with silhouette and proportion. Two very important things in design. And what you're going to see me use a lot are the Lasso Tools, the circular marquee tool and the rectangular marquee tool. And you're going to see me fill them in, just just to kind of make shapes, and then use those shapes to sort of warp and transform and create the silhouette that I'm after. So let's get started. I was opening a new document here and going straight away with the circular marquee tool. If you hold down Shift, it pulls out a perfect circle, a perfect radius. So I'm just darkening the edges and using the gradient tool, just kind of create a highlight. You'll see that I've actually in the layers menu I had on the preserve transparency checkerboard, which I've just switched on there. So that will mean that I can only paint within that circle. So just making a new layer to create the hole where the camera head's going to be. I've just pulled out the guides and switched on snap so that I will get the true center of that circle. And if you hold down Shift and Alt when you drag out the circular marquee tool, it will drag out from a center point. So I will get a perfect circle from the center of this design. I've got on I was just painting in a clipping mask there. That's where you if you put on a layer above the layer that you are drawing on, and you right click that layer and you choose create clipping mask, you can only paint on the pixels that are beneath it. So very, very handy if you just want to quickly sketch over something. So I've just gone in there and I'm just removing top third, trying to see how much I want to remove. Again, I'm pasting it back on because I'm not deleting it. I'm just cutting it away from it. You see that I want it to look like it gets pushed out from that sphere. So there's a perfect example of me using the marquee tools. So that was the rectangular marquee tool, and I filled it with a solid black shape, and then moved to a lighter color, just with a soft airbrush, and just put a highlight down the center, and it gives the illusion of it being a cylinder. So now I have that cylinder that I can insert wherever I want. Just darkening those edges, just trying making it feel cylindrical. Excuse me. I'm just kind of painting in a lot of mechanical details and notches that I would imagine might be there. Just something to break up that line. I'm just using the actual line tool there itself to create these nice little very sharp shot lines. I'm only painting one side here because what I'm actually going to do is copy and paste it over to the other side. It saves me time, and plus I know that this way it will also be perfectly symmetrical. Just compressing the layers there. So it's starting to take shape. If you've got the move tool selected and you're trying to perform a function over a layer and you're not too sure what layer you're working on, if you actually right click, it'll bring up a list of layers and you can select the layer you want. I was actually trying to delete the wrong layer there, so that's what I was doing. So there you go, just taking that cylinder from the left and just using the transform tool. Straight away I've got a bigger cylinder. Not really having to paint anything. The great thing about working like this with an orthographic view is that it's very easy to edit. You can change the scale of something, you can change its position, and you're not having to repaint. You can change it doesn't change in perspective. So what I'm doing here is I'm just repeating that little paintbrush mark that I applied, and I'm finding the center. I'm clicking, at least I think I'm going to. I'm just up-resing that to 150 dpi. So I realise that I am going to repeat that around, so I know it's going to have this is a hole where there's going to be a camera and a light, and this camera and a light is also going to have a bit of a shroud over it. So as I'm going to repeat it around 3 times, I'm just making sure that I paint what I want on that first one. You just saw me there just copying and pasting that left hand side over to the right, so again just maintaining symmetry. So here you go. I'm going to find the center of that radius. I'm going to select that layer. I'm going to do edit transform, and I've just pulled the marker point from the transform box down to the crosshairs there where the rulers cross. That means that's my pivot point. And then once I'm there, I can just drag that side over and flip horizontal. It really is. It is a very, very quick and easy way to design something like this. We're looking at this, and it's all about proportions and design, shape and form. So this is my little my mood board of reference. And this is where I'm getting the camera head detail from. Of course, I can't use it in that place because it's the photo is taken from a slight sort of 3/4 angle. But what I can do is take some of the details like that, the actual camera lens, and just paste that back in. And then what I'm doing is just copying the details from the camera head straight over. I've got that. That circle again. Preserve transparency is checked on, so I can just paint without worrying about going over the edges. Painting a little highlight there on those sharp lines. Again, as I'm applying these, I know that I'm going to, I kind of know how I'm going to make them in SketchUp. All these little holes, little bolt holes, screw holes, socket holes. I'm placing them in, and I know how I'm going to model that in SketchUp. So it's kind of, I'm designing, but it's also sort of like a kind of like a to-do list, so I can always refer back to this and remember to model those little bolt holes on the side. Just a little custom brush there. A little duplicate brush mark that I was just getting rid of. So what I want to do is I want there to be a little array of lights in there, a bit like the LED lights you see in car headlamps these days. In a way, this is kind of like it's almost like a modeling approach to painting in Photoshop, because if you were doing this in in a 3D modeling program and you were making a cylinder and you wanted the cylinder to be smaller or longer, you can transform that. You would just extrude one end or one side, and that's kind of like what we're doing with these shapes in Photoshop. So we're just going back to this reference board because I want some sort of mechanical weapon, like a Gatling gun. Can't be a good old Gatling gun, but just to shake things up a bit, I'm going through a 3-barreled Gatling gun. I'm just using the marquee tool to delete the excess there and erase into it a little bit. I don't know how much of this I'm going to keep, but it can be quite handy sometimes to just take that photo reference and you're just kind of bashing it in there. You see how you've taken the saturation down so that it fits in my model and I'm not distracted by colour. And this looks completely ridiculous, but sometimes you can get some happy accidents, and you can see some things that are working, and be able to get the detail, that free detail from the photo. So it's just trying out, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't. I'm just experimenting here. I'm quite liking that cap. It's got some nice bolt detail on it. So I'm imagining there'd be some sort of a cradle or a groove that the Gatling gun can pivot up and down in. So that's what I was just erasing there. A little groove, a slot that this gun can sit in. I mean, you can draw all this stuff, sketchy style, but with just pen and paper, or even with just the pen tool in Photoshop, and be a lot more sketchy about it, be a bit more linear, and I do that too. It's just that recently I've really enjoyed this this way of working. Again, just because you're dealing with just big forms, and two things that are really important, which are proportion and silhouette. And I really wanted this to have a very, very strong silhouette, very unusual silhouette, very strong silhouette. As I'm painting this, I'm imagining some really cool backlit scenes as well. So it's doubly important that I get a strong silhouette down and make sure the proportions are looking good. And as you can see, it's when you work this way, it's very, very easy to step back and see if a proportion is working, and if it's not, then you can just hit Command T, the transform shortcut, and just reduce the thickness of something, or maybe you need to extend something more. It's highly editable, highly editable. So you see I've taken a gun turret from one Russian helicopter. I quite like the ammo boxes that are either side. I think they're ammo boxes anyway, but that's what I'm imagining they are. And we're just photo bashing from the other Gatling gun. It's a nice little bit of it's more detailed, and getting some happy accidents there. Saves me having to draw them. Just transforming that into position. Just erasing into it a little bit there, just cleaning it up. And I don't want to be super detailed with this, but what I'm planning to do is just copy this over to the other side. So I want to make sure that you do the work on one, and you kind of double your money when you copy it over. Just having a look through, seeing if there's anything else I can put on there. Try to see if I can use some seam detail. So I'm just adjusting the curves there, just to sit it back in there. I'm just reorganizing my layers, because what I want to do is merge that gun turret down with all its layers and be able to copy it over. It's just moving this stuff out of the way. I'm not deleting it, I may come back to it, but it can be a little distracting. So I've merged all that down, so I can just copy it straight over, transform, flip horizontal. And a really quick keyboard shortcut for those who don't know, is the layer you're working on is to press Command T, and or Control T if you're on a PC. And if you right click within the transform box, you will get an option of transform actions, where you can distort, flip horizontal, rotate, skew. and you can select it within there. It just saves having to go up to the edit menu every single time. Very, very handy, something that I use all the time. I don't think I've ever done anything from the edit menu for years. Again, just using a little bit of photo detail to indicate some sort of cylindrical tech, like a seam line, a shut line, something. Maybe there's a bearing in there. That's what it rotates around. So using the airbrush tool there to cast some shadows underneath that, just to show that the form is spherical. Again, you see me just even copying over that shadow. And again, I've got preserve transparency locked, so I'm only painting on that layer. So that's, I just pushing the forms a bit, so I was just darkening the shadows and just bringing the highlights up a bit, just so we were really feeling that shape. So just going in and putting the legs. Again, sort of zoomed out a little bit here. I don't really know where these legs are going to go. I'm just blocking in something that is feeling right proportionally. And give me a little approximate of where I want to go. And I don't know what they are, but I just feel like something needs to be there. So you're just blocking it in. We're not concerned with detail. It's just, note to self, something has to go here. So we're just taking that little block and layer down. I'm going in with the marquee tool to just sort of repeat what I've been doing. There we go, there's a rectangular marquee tool, and I can just transform away. I'm just performing a little copy drag. Copy drag is a very, very useful tool. It's actually if you I'm using a Mac, so whatever layer you're using, if you hold down Shift and Option and drag, it will copy that layer. This is some sort of conical radar dish that I want there. So it's very similar to rendering a sphere, but we've got to indicate that it comes to a sharper point, and I'm doing that by putting that sharp shadow underneath the center. And just using our little cylinder that we made. There we go. Copy drag, copy drag. All the materials are there. I'm not really having to paint much. We're really just sort of using a lot of what's there, transforming it, copying it. Copy drag again, transform. Just making these little collars. Again, you could paint it. Certainly could, but you would have to either use a very angular brush or go back in and make sure that you had squared off the edges. So it's, like I say, just a very, very quick way to do it. So I'm just merging these layers down so I can copy it over to the right hand side. There we go, just Command T, transform, and then right click and select flip horizontal. Seeing what sort of detail I can use for the other side here. So I'm just transforming it. Using select color range there, see if I could just delete the blue sky, taking the saturation down. What I'm liking about that is actually the base that it's sat on, that cylinder with the flange and the that little scalloped detail in the center. Just adjusting the curves, and when you're using photos, you'll tend to find, especially stuff that's been taken outside, the contrast is very harsh on it. So I was just lifting up the black level there, just to make sure it sits with the rest of my model. So it's got that nice seam line on it, with those bolts around it. Just erasing the brush marks behind that bit of photo reference. Just taking the top of that arm down, I felt they were looking a bit too chunky. Just dropping it down there. Because we did use the copy drag function, and so they were just looking a bit too repetitive, which is you always run the risk of doing so. Sometimes you have to go back in and sort of tweak a few. There we go. So I'm just copying that one over to the other side. Deciding not to keep that scallop mark on that one. I'm going to be fairly symmetrical with the design, but I'm going to be throwing in some little asymmetrical touches here and there. So this is going to be more of a classic radar, and that'll be spinning round. If you ever see video footage of those the Gatling guns on naval battleships, I think they're called phalanx cannons or phalanx guns, or goalkeeper is the name for one of them. I know. They've got these fantastic radar arrays on top, and one of them's always spinning round. So I'm imagining that that one on the right would be spinning round. So again, we're in the orthographic view here, so I can just change the scale here, make a mark, change the scale, push it around, and I don't have to worry about perspective. You see on that little, on the actual radar bar on the top there, I painted I darkened one of the corners there just to make it look like it's turning. Just taking the corners off that little shape that I drew with the marquee tool. I tend to do that as well. If you're drawing stuff with the marquee tool, all the corners are that sharp and 90 degrees. Not very product or industrial. So sometimes you have to go back in and just chip the corners off. So there we go. Look, just using the skew function or distort. I can't remember what that was there. So again, I don't really know where I'm going with these. I know that I have to have legs there, so we're just, these are pretty much placeholders, and I know I'm going to be working on top of them, looking at some photo reference, seeing how this looks, seeing if it's working. Just highlighting the top side of the base there. Just adjusting that highlight. So you can see that that's immediately gone from just being a flat box to now we've got a top side which tapers towards camera and seems to have some sort of like a bumper bar with a shadow line underneath it. So we've got a front edge, so now we can see a top edge that's at an angle, and a front side. So we're just starting to turn these forms a little bit. So this is ultimately what I want, what I'm after. This sort of hydraulic arm and all this lovely detail. So I'm just pasting that in place and taking the saturation down. You know, unlike a lot of photo ref, and if you are photo bashing, you're going to have to go in and just sort of clean them up afterwards. So I'm just cutting that away from the base so I can pivot it down. It was the angle was too high. So you see I'm just zooming out and noticing that they actually need to be a little bit bigger. So just transform that there. So again, just copying from our cylinder that we had already made and just dragging that into position. So I'm just going through a transition of scale here for this piston, for this leg. And I'm not having to paint anything again, I'm just cutting and pasting and transforming it to be a little bit smaller. So of course that's the shiny steel piston, so all I'm doing is just dialing up the contrast, make it a bit more reflective. Just selecting that layer, locking the pixels and airbrushing on a little shadow so it feels like it's actually coming from the center of that cylinder now. So there we go, dragging from that cylinder again, compressing it, we've got a foot. So I just put in a ground plane there just to see, to make sure, see where I want it to be sitting. Just erasing some angles on that foot because I know I want it to taper. I don't want it to be just a clumsy disc. I was actually imagining that, like quite a few of these tutorials, I would, paint and talk, but as I didn't really know where I was going to go with, excuse me, with this, there was just a lot of time where I'm just sat there looking at it, and my brain's thinking, my brain's kind of ticking away, trying to answer and solve questions. So unfortunately, I can't really paint and talk. Some guys can, and it's great, and sometimes it's more helpful because you're sort of in the moment with them, but I just can't do it. Tried it, and it's a real obstruction. So because I'm imagining that this drone, this mech, has got 3 feet, I want the front 2 feet to be facing us at an angle. So kind of facing us at a 45-degree angle. So where instead of it being flat on, we're actually going to see sort of 3/4 of this leg now. So I'm just indicating that by copying over that side panel and nudging it over. I'm imagining that side panel, could serve as sort of protective armor for that hydraulic foot. It also provides a big flat surface to put pivot points in for the hydraulic leg. So I'm just making an actual piston here by using our cylinder, repeating the process what we did on the leg earlier, where I transform one part to be smaller, and I bring up the black and bring up the white point to increase the reflectivity and make it look like a steel bar. So I'm not sure at this point if if that's the actual correct positioning for hydraulics. If I want that foot to function in a particular sort of way, but from a design standpoint, it feels like it's working for me. And I later on down the line, I don't know if I'm gonna keep it or if I'm gonna just put something else there instead. Just painting on some flanges there, just giving some detail to those cylinders, stop the edges from being so straight. Just erasing into that photo ref there, just carving, getting the silhouette back again. I'm just zooming out and checking proportions, seeing if that's working. So I'm to do a little bit of layer management there, because when I paint, I can get quite sort of layer happy at times. So I'm just getting them all together so I can compress them and copy it over to the other side, as you see there. And straight away that's feeling very strong, very interesting. Nice amount of techie detail. So like I said, we've got a foot which will sit at the back. So that's what we're seeing there. So I'm to knock it back a bit there. Here we go, just taking the corners off some of these shapes. Just refine it. I've got the silhouette here, and I'm happy with it. So it's just about kind of sitting here and refining it now. I'm going in for the detail pass, cleaning up the outline. Just punching some of the shadows, making sure the forms are reading correctly, and also just seeing, what else can I use. So this base has actually got some nice detail on it, so I'm going to copy that and drop that straight onto there. It's a lot of free detail, it's fantastic. Of course, it's a little bit out of scale with the model, but we will adjust that when I come to actually model it. But at the moment, I'm just looking for kind of a visual noise. That's working quite well now that I split it down the center and I've just extended it. So I'm just, sampling the color tones and painting across. That's a very good bit of photo reference as well. It was in the correct perspective to enable me to just drop it in there. Didn't really have to do much else to it. And this is a nice detail. There's that tow bar detail with those two punched holes as well. So we want that. And also, kind of helps describe things from a design point of view. I don't necessarily want this thing to look like it can walk. It's not a walking mech, but the hydraulics could indicate that it can sort of adapt on a terrain, or perhaps it can rotate a little bit, it can shuffle. But I don't want it to look like a walking mech. I can imagine that it sort of could raise up a little bit and rotate around, get itself into position. Just copying over those details. So now that the forms are good and I'm happy with the shape, it's you can go in and decide what goes on that face. Because the detail that I can put on there isn't going to affect this silhouette. I'm not really affecting the design. I'm just I'm enhancing this now. Don't know if I'm going to keep a lot of this detail, but for the concept it works. Very, very just quick visual detail. And that's what photo bashing is great for, is just pulling in instant detail. But you've got to make the photo reference work for you. And what I mean by that is, a lot of the time you can't just dump a bit of photo texture on there and just have it work. That's very, very rare. You need to edit it. You need to make it fit your design rather than your design fit the photo reference. So don't be afraid to go in and edit it and erase and cut. Just putting in a shadow underneath it, make it look like it's actually sitting on the floor there. Just helps to ground it. And give it some weight. And so now you can feel that it's got this fantastic low center of gravity. It's got a nice stance. It's got a lot of weight in that body, but it's sitting low to the ground. Very stable. So just kind of looking at this and feeling that that top was a little bit too big. So again, one of the benefits of working in this kind of orthographic view is I can just cut that out and resize it. And actually all I did was I ended up keeping that original size and just dropping it down a bit. But I'm still wanting to keep the height, I think, so I'm just seeing what that looked like with longer gun arms. Just trying it out. It was also very important that those gun turrets don't look like ears. It's so easy and actually very natural, for the human eye to find a face within something. Lights become eyes, grills become mouths. This spherical shape, is a head, and it'd be very, very easy to see those as ears. So I had to be very mindful of that. Just put on a little grey background just to take the white out of it, see if I can make it a little bit more of an interesting rendering, a bit more of an interesting painting. gives the illusion that it's a photo taken in a photo studio. And so because those edges were the same tone as the background, I'm just darkening them, just popping them out. Just making sure your eye is really picking out that as a silhouette, getting that strong silhouette back. Just turning those forms, pushing the shadows a bit more. I'm doing all this on a separate layer, so I could erase back if I felt like I'd done too much. So I'm just choosing the burn tool, and I'm selecting shadows, so we're really affecting the darker tones here, so I am just pushing the dark areas a little bit more. So kind of increasing the contrast. So now I'm choosing the dodge tool, and I've got mid-tone selected, so I'm just pushing the areas that will be lit. I've actually, if you can see in my layers menu, I've duplicated this layer, so if I feel like I've gone too far with the dodge or the burn tool, I can always erase back, or I can delete that layer and start again, but I don't have to worry about going too far. That's what I'm doing here. I'd use the dodge tool to lighten that main head, and then I use the eraser to just kind of cut back where the shadows are, where those lights sit. Just making those cylinders pop. Just zooming in here and cleaning up these faces because they're a little bit confusing. Wasn't too sure which way which way the forms were facing. Painting back in some shot lines, some edges. Again, this is all on a layer, so I don't have to worry about overcooking it. Just just painted a bolt head and copy merge, copy merge, copy merge. So that's if you press Shift Alt to copy drag, and then Command E will merge it back down again, so you can rapidly duplicate a single item. Excuse me. Just seam lines, painting those in. Again, I'm even doing a copy transform on these little dots. I could have painted them in, but just trying to keep that symmetry going all the way around it. Just putting in a little bit of surface noise here with some scratchy marks. When you're using the soft airbrush, it's very things can become very fluffy, and I've got very hard edges there, so I wasn't really suffering from that problem. But I just want to put in a little bit of surface noise. Things of this scale. Things have brushed past them. They've been transported, they've been shipped, and even if it's new, they would have a little bit of something on it. And those little dots just really help just describe a a surface, make it a bit more believable that it's there. Just putting some detail marks on that collar. Shadow lines. I'm just kind of darkening the edges there and those corners, and you can see I've actually got a layer over. That's merged it, but I had a layer over that main layer. There's a clipping mask, so I was able to be quite free with it. I'm just using the dodge tool and a custom brush with set to scatter to just put a bit more surface noise on, a little bit of surface patina. Like a speckle brush. I'm just erasing the overspray. Adjustment there, just to see, let's crank this a little bit more, make it more contrasty. A little bit of overspray there that I hadn't noticed, so just erasing that. A bit of light bloom around those lights. I'm just going back in and making sure that those legs are dark on the bottom. Just kind of noticing those little areas that I just need to push a little bit more. Darkening the shadow. That's looking pretty good. Quick sharpen. Done. Aberration as well. Never fails.